Hello, so welcome to WGTA on the road. Yes, it's a quick turnaround pod this Sunday as game week 13 ends, but game week 14 is just over the horizon in midweek. Apologies for any below par sound tonight. As you can tell, I'm not at home. I'm in a hotel room up in Manchester. I'm up here seeing my sister, so I have my microphone with me. I'm using kind of plug-in earphones, annoyingly. But it is what it is. It's one of those kind of things. I was out last night as well. Shout out to James at Planet FPL. I was out with him last night, so I might be less lucid today, and my voice is probably less velvety than normal, more husky. So sorry for any coughing, spluttering, anything else like that that could happen on this pod this evening. Big shout out as well before we get going to the guys who were there last night: Zod, Sean, James from Season Keepers. Jimmy, Claret FPL, met him in real life, really nice guy. Gary, Johnny Pringle, Andy, and Leon. I even met Heskebo in person, Anthony, who I can confirm is not Edward Heskey.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good to know.
The funny thing is that all the Northerners pissed off about 10 o'clock, and it was just me and James, like the two Southerners, drinking till midnight. And then we went off and found fried chicken at 2 a.m. A nice place called Dixie's opposite the station. The glamour of podcast in life. I felt for James there as well with the Burnley game called off, but there you go. Anyway, we are Who Got the Assist. I'm Tom. You can find me on Twitter at WGTA_FPL. My co-host is Anthony at FPL Stag. The league code is 2IP43T. Oh, you're right, Anthony. Snowy here in Manchester and freezing cold. What's it been like in Dublin?
It's been cold, but fortunately, it hasn't been as cold as it is in some of the north of the UK. So, whilst I was at the FAI Cup final, the Irish FA Cup final this afternoon, and did nearly lose fingers because it went extra time, and penalties indeed. So, I had the full run of an afternoon in Dublin in the freezing cold. It still wasn't as cold as it was over there in England, and of course, there was no question of the game ever being called off, which of course happened for the first time in a very long time. We had a Premier League game postponed to do with weather. So that was an interesting one too this week, and obviously has had a bit of an effect on scores, in particular when it came to those Spurs players. So an interesting game week, and kind of brings us very quickly to the next game week too, of course, with fixtures on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. So all is well. But based on that quick turnaround, this is going to be one of those short pods where we quickly run through some correspondence, listener questions, and get this thing uploaded basically for people to listen to. And so with that in mind, let's start off straight away with the game week reviews.
I think you're first actually. I mean, a decent all-round performance this week. Alan deep already.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. Alan deep unexpectedly, but he came in for Son. Wasn't one of Alan's finest performances in terms of FPL, but look, these things happen. Even the greats don't necessarily have a great week every week. I was kind of lamenting my score because I felt like a 55 was a decent score. And then I kind of had a quick look at our Slack mini league and I see that quite a lot of people got into the 60s and I'm just missing out. And the real great absentee in my side was Diogo Jota. Now, I thought when Bukayo Saka got one goal for me, I thought, okay, well, that's probably the Jota problem mitigated for the game week when he'd obviously scored before Jota even played. But no, unfortunately, Jota went and got a brace. And so he kind of smashed my score downwards and meant that no matter what happened, really, I didn't have a great week. I was also maybe missing out on decent goalkeeper points because as we flagged in last week's pod, I joined you on Guaita. That didn't work out well. 1 point. If I just hung on and actually just kept Sanchez, for example, now he'd have done better over the few weeks than Guaita has. So that's a bit frustrating. I had Cancelo and Rudiger, but they were my only two City and Chelsea defenders. So that kind of meant I didn't have the big clean sheet wipeout that a lot of people would have had who were doubled up on, or even tripled up indeed, on those defenses. I did have Ben White for 6 points, which was good, and I had Trent Alexander-Arnold for 9 points. I didn't get as much out of the Arsenal defence as others did, though, I guess, especially through Ramsdale. So whilst there was a little victory there, it wasn't exactly a fantastic one either. Saka, as noted in midfield, Rafinha with a 3-pointer, Salah captain for 12, Tony up front for 9, and Gabriel Jesus with another unfortunate 2-pointer. It kind of continues to happen for him that he does well, the points are there, but he doesn't seem to get them. And I kind of feel like there's a double figure hole in him in every single game you watch him play. Yeah. And indeed, if Champions League games counted, then he would have had a double figure hole against bloody PSG in the middle of the week. It's just like it's there. He is getting the chances, he's just not taking them, or the world is conspiring to have, his own teammate in the way in the form of Phil Foden, who gets the goal instead. These sorts of moments continue to happen to him while I've owned him. And so as a differential, he just really has not paid off. But anyway, look, 55 points, it brings me up about 10% of my rank, let's say, to, mid 5 just on the high 400Ks, which is, look, it's fine, but I do want to be pushing on at this stage. 476K to give that precisely. So 797 points in total.
Yeah, no, fair play. I mean, I didn't do too much better than you, to be honest. 57 points to me this week. Really, it's all about the transfer. There's a bit of added spice this week. So a bit of a mea culpa. I reversed Gundogan and got Jota in last week. I think it was on the Thursday night. He was rising to 7.6. I had perfect money to do it. I looked at the non-pen XG for Liverpool again and noted that it was a massive amount. I think it was 10 non-pen XG above everybody else's, basically, especially above City. I looked at Jota's data again and just thought, yeah, objectively, I need to get that done, even though I've been digging myself a bit of a hole about him. And I did it, and it felt great, obviously, yesterday when he scored the brace. I felt a bit hot under the collar today, though. Gundogan, goal and assist, 13 points. One less point than Jota. So 1 point profit for making that free transfer. Hooray! I guess if it had turned out, that Gundogan's undershot Jota a little bit further, I'd be saying something like, it's really important not to be stubborn. And I felt it was best for my team not to be doubling down in a bad position. But I guess the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And maybe I could have left it and had that second free transfer for this midweek. But I felt like I needed to go for it and get Jota at that kind of 7.5 kind of entry price.
Seem to have muted yourself.
Yeah. Elsewhere, it's a bit crap, really. Guaita 1 point when Sanchez and Ramsdale both kept cleanies. Wasn't great. 1-2 for Cancelo and James, but less bothered about those. I mean, when those goals went in, that was a negative FPL hashtag. Don't celebrate when bad things happen to other people. Like, I was thought, well, those people have got double Chelsea and double City clean defenders. So I thought, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. 9 for Trem, that's hygiene, really. Jota and Salah obviously returned. Other than midfielders, absolutely useless. And Buemo, absolutely useless. Conor Gallagher, I should say, useless. Rafinha, well, it's more Leeds who are useless. Dan James up front, I mean, really? And up front, Kane missed out, so Antonio came off the bench. But the big differential success was, yet again, Emmanuel Dennis, his second double-digit haul in a row. 10 points this week. I started him, though, this time, rather than getting him off second bench. And by all accounts, he was a handful before he was subbed off with a potential injury. I guess he'll be third on my bench for a while, though. So a nice passing gift before he disappears off into the reserves. Shout out to us as well for tipping Josh King last week as well. He's now second for non-pen XG among strikers in the Premier League. In FPL, I should say, actually, according to FBref. So, yeah. Very, very nice. And Mr. Joshua King, all those Norwegian football fans going wild. Those striker fans, Anthony, absolutely loving it. Right. So that takes me up to 205K. I think I climbed like 25K places. So a bit of a tread towards a game week. I think next week, again, there's going to be a trading awards one, which we'll come to at the very end. Objectives, very, very quickly. Anything particularly standing out here for you, Anthony? I don't think any of these quite apply to you, do they?
No, nothing really. Captain safety was as per usual there. Didn't take any hits. In fact, I rolled my transfer, so I didn't make any late transfers or anything like it. And there isn't really any questions about any of my elite players as it stands right now. So no questions on my ones.
No, fair play. Captaincy, I feel like I've got to keep saying it, but yeah, I did. It's Salah, so there's no question there. But maybe there are some questions actually later on. 50-50 situation. I say here, take a hit. But Gundo to Jota was a 50-50, and I decided to go with it following the form, I suppose, in kind of the common with number 3 as well. Transfers take a chance on form. Liverpool were doing very, very well on the underlying data, and obviously that was being expressed on the pitch. Jota slightly less so, but he had scored a goal, and his underlying data was very, very strong. So I decided to go with it basically, and got away with it by the skin of my teeth. Quickly on the mini league, few moves and shakers. We were recording pretty much straight after the game weeks just ended, so not everything's up to date yet. What I do know is that we've got 2 new entrants to the league going straight into the top 10. First, though, Daniel Mind of Steadfast FC clings on just by 5 points, 65 points for Daniel this week. But second, new to the mini league, is Kevin Walsh with 62 points, 953 points, so just 5 behind Daniel. Good time to enter the league, I guess, when you're absolutely killing it. That means that poor old Graham Murray is pulled down to third. Not too far behind Kevin, actually. He's only 5 points behind him. Got 56 points this week, though, so it kind of made sense why he got the rev. In fourth, up from sixth, is Christian Mitanovsky, King, 68 points this week. In fifth, up from eighth, Robert Paul Shakes and Waits goes up from eighth to fifth, 67 points. This all means that Beelzebub 11, Richard Carswell with 55 points goes down from third to sixth. Mohammed Arafa, 64 points isn't enough to stop him dropping just to one place from sixth to seventh. In eighth, Sean McGarry, who's been in around the top 10 for the majority of this campaign, is back in the top 10, up from 11th. In ninth, some dude called James Carroll, who I believe was on our podcast, finally pulled his finger out and decided to join the bloody mini league. Of course, that happens to coincide with him being in the top 1K. So well done, James. 61 points this week. He joins the mini league in ninth. But we probably need to close it soon to stop miscreants like that joining just to get my name read out on a podcast. I'm glad that the audio isn't good here, it doesn't mean that he doesn't get like a really, really nice sort of readout. He gets like a bit of a fluffy one around the sort of time with poor audio. In 10th, all the way up from 70th. That's a huge jump. Andreas Stalheim, 79 points. That's a huge week. He brought in Jota and Dennis this week, so some quite interesting transfers there. As I said, 79 points, just 3 points behind James in ninth. And he's actually joined 10th with Bantusile Oxymoron, Payola FC, 65 points for them, 22nd up to 10th. So very well done. Good going. 60s, something like that, as we were saying earlier on, enough to get you around. Market forces, Anthony. What's going on? I mean, we've literally just, as I mentioned a second ago, finished this game week, but I'm guessing there's a lot of reaction to what's just occurred.
Yeah, and most of it really is following the man that we've already discussed a little bit already in your own team review, and that is Diogo Jota. He is the most transferred in player right now, 217k transfers in as it stands right now, which kind of puts him far and away ahead of anybody else. The second most transferred in is Reece James at Chelsea, just over 100k transfers in. People not too put off by the fact that he faces Josh King and Dennis next in the next game against Watford. So he's now 6.2 mil. Looks like he's going to go up even further probably before those game weeks go. The interesting thing about him as well there is that this Man United game was the first time he played 90 minutes this year and didn't end up hauling. So a nice reprieve for those of us who didn't own him. Then it's really a smattering of players making up the rest of the top 10 and top 5 in terms of transfers in, with about 50-ish K transfers in. Those kind of just will name a few of them: Conor Gallagher, Bernardo Silva, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, and the aforementioned Dennis is also in there too. In terms of transfers out, the lead transfer out is actually quite interestingly Ben Chilwell, and that's obviously being kind of driven by his injury. He is been transferred out by 163k managers right now, so I guess that's what's driving the traffic towards Reece James. People going for James ahead of Marcos Alonso, as it seems, based on that. Then in terms of transfers out, Phil Foden, Ismaila Sarr, Ben Rama, and then really it's a smattering of players like Shane Duffy, Damari Gray, and Mikel Antonio as well, actually, is the most transferred out forward, with just 39k transfers out. He's just ahead of Cristiano Ronaldo. So really, it's just a lot of people reacting quickly to try and find ways to get Diogo Jota and Reece James into their side, basically sending out injured players, it seems.
Gotcha, exactly. I mean, really paint by the numbers stuff of the transfers thus far. I'm not sure people should be jumping in on Dennis, though. He came off injured. Ranieri said he didn't know what the situation was with him. So it's one to keep an eye on if you're looking at him thinking, I want some of that double-digit action. Probably one to keep an eye on, especially with Chelsea up next, who are a decent defence. Right, so we move on. No key topic today, as mentioned, straight into the correspondence. And this week, it's one of those classics, but one that's worth talking about every now and again, nonetheless, isn't it, Anthony?
Yes, indeed, Tom. So the correspondence section is a section where people can send in their long form questions, their thoughts, their addendums to previous pods, or indeed songs, poetry, or anything else, usually to whogottheassist@gmail.com, though other means of contacting us, such as WhatsApp, DMs, etc., can be useful too if you want to get into this section. This man is called Ski, emailed in early October, actually. So it's a little bit back now at this point that we've got his email. But such is the correspondence section, we're just inundated with stuff all the time, and we've just about got around to this one now. Anyway, Ski went as such. Hi guys, avid listener of the pod since inception. Enjoying the chat a lot more than my current FPL rank of 800k-ish. I hope it's improved since Ski. And that leads me on to a more macro question. For those of us unable to watch live football or even struggle to watch highlights because of kids and jobs, etc., one option is to rely on interpreting stats as you see fit, and the eye test and other FPL players that other FPL players provide on podcasts, on Twitter, on Reddit, etc. Given the eye test can have such a gut feel and therefore be quite a personal subjective judgment, do you have any advice for those of us in this situation? I'm migrating through this process, and although multifactorial, I'm finding FPL far more difficult. There's been a notable decline in my own personal FPL performance as life events interfere, and whilst I have a relatively laissez-faire attitude to the poor game week, or multiple successive poor game weeks in my case, I'm starting to wonder if there's actually a thing or just our old friend variance. Keep up the good work, guys. Cheers. Ski. So an interesting question that Ski has kind of provided there, and it's basically asking us about, if you're not able to watch much football, to what extent can you trust other people's eye tests or just raw stats in and of themselves? Tom, do you have any thoughts on that? Obviously a busy weekend for you in Manchester, so maybe you're well placed to.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen very much at all actually. This game week, hands up, I've been with family the whole time, and obviously out drinking. So I'm afraid I haven't seen too much football this weekend. I think I saw a bit today. Saw kind of match day highlights when I got in last night. The sort of thing you do at 3 a.m. when you're just having a water before you go to bed. But I guess in answer to this question, I guess we'd always say balance. We're always going to favour melding the eye test, the subjective side of it, with the more objective sort of stats overview, bearing in mind behavioural stuff, researcher bias, confirmation bias. But I guess as well, when you're trying to find out other people's opinions, it's through the lens of their perspective too. So, you're going to get their view on the data sort of thing, that researcher bias coming in. I guess there's a few kind of tools or things that I would use if I was not able to watch as much football and I was making my decisions kind of third hand, second hand sort of thing. The first kind of main tool that I'd use is FBref/StatsBomb. I think that's probably best for team and player stats. I can't recommend it enough, basically. Competitions, Premier League, squads and player stats, standard stats. There's a whole kind of table there. And if you want to make it extra simple for yourself and live in the expected data, specifically non-penalty expected goals and assists. If you're picking out a player, that's very useful. Use that as a measure to judge what you do next. So, they rarely lie. I mean, you might get the oddity like my pal Brian and Buemo, but mostly they're fairly dead on Jota this week. And it's an advantage in some ways. You're shorn of that personal subjectiveness, things that have plagued me in the past. So, I've hated watching Jota in my team in the past. So that came into my thinking last week when actually I should have made a more objective decision. FPL voices wise, including ours, there are very many out there. I just say don't overcomplicate and stick to the handful you genuinely trust. For example, I was saying to James last night that I listened to those guys as kind of a counterweight to us, kind of like a check and balance to see if what our data centric mostly analysis has said is backed up by their sort of eye test reporting of the games. And normally, this season we've kind of synergized pretty well. Similarly on socials, if you trust someone or find something particularly handy, like Big Man, Because, Fred, FPL Architects, Corf FPL, they do, those game week preview threads. If you like them, if you trust them, stick to them. And finally, there's one other thing you can look at, which we do cover every week, which is the market. You can just follow it. I know it sounds a bit sort of overly simplistic, but there's always going to be, a reason why players are being brought in. I mean, there are always those sort of duddy weeks where things make zero sense. You remember a few weeks ago, people were shifting Ings and Alonso after 5 weeks of them not playing and buying Antonio for some reason. But normally points correspond to ownership, and normally points correspond to ownership rises. So if you're not sure, you haven't had time to really look at it, there is wisdom in the crowd. Although I'd understand if you were kind of reticent. So there you go, FBref/stats bomb, being selective with your sources, and the market. Those three things I think would be kind of the way that I'd get round not being able to watch as much football as I'd like.
To be honest, Tom, I think you've pretty much very succinctly put together my own thoughts on this as well. So there's very little for me to add, only that I'm very reticent to rely on pretty much anybody's eye test. I just find that people look to see what they want to see often. They're so frequently, they especially when it's FPL managers we're talking about, they give their takes based on FPL points, not what actually occurred, unless it's something glaringly obvious. There's never really much given for good performances or things looking good. It's very much just what occurred, and therefore the opinion is kind of edited and sculpted to tally with that. And so with that in mind, I'm very reticent to rely on others, and I think I'm becoming more and more data heavy the further I go on with things. That said, I find that opinions of others are very useful for if you're just trying to kind of get an idea of what's going on with the team formationally, or in terms of which players are more likely to be nailed week by week. If you don't watch a team gospel week in, week out, then sometimes it's the people who watch that team week in, week out have a far better idea of what's going on and who's actually stuck in that team and who doesn't just happen to be there, and whose performance and who getting in X positions wasn't just accidental quirk of that particular game and is actually something that the team tries to do as part of the way they set up to play or whatever. And that's where I find the other opinions are useful. But just in kind of the overall macro of deciding on FPL transfers and the basis for doing so, I try to avoid really listening to others too much on that particular aspect of it. But that's me anyway. On that particular question. So thanks very much, Ski, for sending in that email to the correspondence section. Ski emailed into whogottheassist@gmail.com. You too can do the same and have your question or whatever it might be featured in this particular slot.
Cool. All right, let's move on to listener questions this week. I had a tiny bit of time before we came online just to kind of group them together. The thing is that obviously there's a few sort of, I guess, little bits and pieces here and there to run through rather than there being, maybe there's one kind of overarching question that we'll come to in just a bit, but we'll run through all manner of sins, because I'm sure there'll be loads of people with little kind of bits and pieces out there that they're looking at with their own teams. So hopefully we'll be able to cover off the majority of those in sort of a quick fire format. The first really is, Craft actually asked us a few questions, but I think they all are actually quite useful, and FPL Dabby also is part of this particular sort of question cluster. First question from Craft, at Langer92, good friend actually. I think he's I've been speaking to him for many years actually. He asked them, how much longer should we hold on to Antonio? Is a Vardy-esque return on the cards? So as Andy was saying last week, maybe this week was the time to be selling Antonio, and perhaps we're at the point now where we might as well just hold on. I mean, the last kind of little while for him has been pretty poor, hasn't it? Really, it's not been it's been one of those things that I've had other things to do elsewhere, so he's just kind of stayed there. But game weeks 1 to 3, Antonio scored 40 points, 8 returns. Between game weeks 4 and 13, he scored 25 points and only got 2 returns. So how long, Anthony, do you think he can dine out in people's teams on that kind of game week 1 to 3 explosion?
Getting definitely harder to hold him. I think I was of the opinion that he was worth holding, as we discussed it last week. The chances kind of, by all accounts, seem to have kind of fallen his way. At least he wasn't completely isolated, let's say, put it this way, in the City game, although, there wasn't exactly any gilt-edged moment or wherever that would give you serious hope for him. I noted last week when we were talking about his underlying stats that he was still getting, a decent shot total, but so few of them were going on target that it was almost alarming, the extent to which he just was seemingly shooting errantly. Now with Brighton up next, okay, that's a tough enough game. The Chelsea game is tough, but then you've Burnley away, and that's kind of a game that you might want to have him for. And the Brighton one even isn't of itself all that, whilst Brighton are always, statistically quite decent, you'd always fancy a robust forward like Mikel Antonio to make hay while the sun was shining there. And so, and don't make the smart comment about the weather. That indeed be sun shining. You just wouldn't think that he'd miss out. And I think this is what you were saying about with Antonio last week, Tom, is that he is the type of player that you wouldn't be surprised to see him score against anybody. And so therefore, as a matter of anything, you're just like, oh, we'll just leave him there and wait and see what occurs. There is maybe, this is what we were talking about last week with an issue with him, is that where would you go to next with him? And I'm still not sure if there's very clear answers there. Okay, you could say the Watford forwards. This wouldn't be the week that you'd want to get one of the Watford forwards in when they're playing Chelsea. Former underlying stats be damned. And so with that in mind, is it a punt on like a Callum Wilson because they're playing Norwich, for example, that you'd be looking at? And this is kind of what Andy was getting at. Is just like, this is why you wouldn't be selling him necessarily right now. I'm inclined to stay a little bit longer personally, purely because of all the value that's tied up there. That it's just like, I can't turn back if I do sell him, but I have fires that I want to put out that mean that I'm not looking to sell him. Just maybe run through some of Pratt's other questions about Jota. Should he be a priority for those of us who don't own him? I'm starting to feel very foolish not owning him this week, and I'm kind of looking, because I have a Saka injury and I've now got my 2 free transfers. I'm kind of in a decent position to trade up, find some money, and find a way to get him into my side. And so, with that in mind, I think even just as it's not even a coverage thing, because there's still a decent EO advantage to having him in the side, but it's just as much as anything, just because the Everton game isn't the type of one that you would expect him to be rotated for. And then after that, Liverpool have Wolves, Villa, Newcastle. Like, it's a decent enough run of fixtures that you wouldn't be too sad about being doubled up on the Liverpool attack for. And so with that, I'm thinking maybe I'll just get him. And then the other question was about Sancho. No, not for me. Just United need to figure out what they're doing a little bit more before I would ever think about bringing in any of their attackers. Not to mind Sancho, who presents such a budgetary problem to get him into your side that I just don't think it's worth doing personally.
Yeah, I mean, Jota, just to mention, has jumped up to second in the Premier League this season in terms of non-pen XGI. He took Sadio Mane to this week. So at that price, the judgment I made wrongly and then corrected, I suspect loads of people will be looking at that. And Everton have been so poor defensively. I mean, they were a little bit better today, but Liverpool as well, their attacking numbers, their underlying data is so good. But you look at that Everton game and you think that could be a massacre. I thought the Southampton game could have been a massacre. I could see Liverpool winning that game by 3 or 4 goals, and Jota's involved in the moment. Like, classic Jota, we didn't get the hat trick, basically. It was just him getting in his own way. But the numbers that game speak for themselves, to be honest. Sancho wise, I mean, Dabby said, great United fixtures. Sancho's playing well. Everyone got on Son and Kane for the new manager bounce. So surely we should apply that logic to Sancho. I think I agree with you in a few ways there, Anthony. I'd also say that Son and Kane have that FPL pedigree. There's also going to be obviously upheaval now. We don't know how Rangnick. Well, I mean, you'd imagine that Rangnick is going to be playing. Statistically, he's probably his best player in Sancho and building the team around him. But we simply don't know. And I think that it might be useful to give it a little while yet, just to see how it all fits together. Because it could be, that Rashford's a better option. It could be, that someone from left field, a Van der Beek or a Martial could come out of the wilderness. We just don't know at this moment how Rangnick is going to be setting up. Good running fixtures are coming. We know that we've scouted them out pretty much at the start of the season. Maybe a bit too much of an eager beaver though to be buying him straight away. So I agree with that completely. Pick and mix number 2. Camran asks, should we stick to Ronaldo or swap to Kane / Vardy? I think that just to cover that off, I think we're probably both going to agree. There's not really too much going on in the striker slots right now, apart from Vardy's sort of renaissance this week to some extent. I reckon you just stick to Ronaldo now, wouldn't you, Anthony?
Would you? I'm not sure if I would, to be honest, stick to Ronaldo just like that.
Okay.
The Arsenal game is going to be a tough game for United. The fact that Ronaldo came off the bench was interesting, to put it mildly. It's just like, where is that going with Carrick for the next just where are they going with this? Are they finally trying to do what the sensible thing with Ronaldo and make him a glorified super sub? Because I think that seems like the most structurally sound thing to do with the team. I don't think they can. But I ponder the extent to which he will continue to be nailed through this Christmas period. Whilst the fixtures are unbelievable there, right now I just feel like you're probably bleeding points trying to make space for the now 12.4 mil forward that he is, with still an awful lot of uncertainty about how United are going to stop the rot, how United are going to play against packed defenses, because they can't really seem to string together complex moves. And whilst they've been very good at finding a magical spark every so often in games this season, it's just obviously proved not to be enough for Ronaldo to justify his price up to now. And so I think I'd like to see a little bit more before getting him. Now, the thing is that what Cameron was asking about Kane or Vardy for him. Okay, yeah, Vardy's had a good week. Leicester have pretty decent fixtures coming up. Spurs, you could say, have decent fixtures coming up, but like Kane hasn't had a good week in a long time. So with that in mind, I guess I'd point him towards Vardy if he wanted to put his money into an elite player. But maybe there's midfield options that might be better worth your budget right now.
Yeah. Okay. No, certainly makes sense. I mean, Kane's got 2 newly promoted teams next, so if you want like a small bang, could be worth looking at. But as you said, Vardy's one of those where you've got the longevity of the pick and you've got a bit of money to play around with. So, I mean, there's an argument to stick with Ronaldo and just kind of think, well, the good fixtures to come in. Depends if you've got other fires to put out as well. Obviously, it's very kind of team specific. Yeah, I mean, I'd be tempted to just kind of give Kane a couple of weeks, but I mean, that's probably just legacy of me thinking that Kane does well against newly promoted teams, which he has done in the past. Maybe that kind of new manager bounce is finally going to come, Anthony, for Spurs. Who knows? Yeah. Right. Wolf asks the _21 _Wolf. What do we do with Foden? It feels like limbo. He says he's already got my beloved Jota in his team. So Foden owners, I guess, holding out hope the man is going to be fit on midweek. Obviously, if you do have Foden and you're kind of looking at Jota, that's the move probably to make at the moment. It's just an obvious one. I wouldn't overthink it too much. But if you're in a situation, Anthony, where you do have Jota, you've got Foden sat there, I mean, would you be advocating, side shuffle to Gundogan perhaps, or Bilver, or would you be kind of saying to go elsewhere?
Yeah, it was quite interesting to see Bernardo Silva having such a prominent position in the market forces, just for the type of player he is. He chips in with 5, 6, 7 goals a season, and he's more than able to get a few assists, but he isn't really the type of player you think from an FPL perspective, and so he certainly isn't one I'd be thinking about. Gundogan having a big haul definitely kind of brings him into sharp focus in a way that he hasn't really been so far this season. Certainly it hasn't been like the Gundogan period of last term up to now. But there are arguments to be made for getting him into your side, and just the fact that, just given the amount of injuries that City have in their midfield, he seems to be relatively nailed as City midfielders go. So you've got Villa, Watford, Wolves, Leeds, Newcastle in the next few for City, and so it'd be nice to have some attacking coverage with them. Like, for that reason, I'm keeping Jesus in my side no matter what I seem to do on similar grounds. Mahrez, ditto, you could kind of point to as an option, but I think either way you'd be looking to sell on Foden. The question is if you'd look to any of the other midfield options. I don't know, Tom, do you think that some sort of gamble that wouldn't involve getting, let's say, Son into Wolves' side might be worth doing? A bit of a punt on a James Maddison type character who's obviously had a very good game for Leicester this week, and with those good fixtures that Leicester have coming. I'm not so certain. I'm not so certain what the clear trajectory is. If I was to say, I would say try and find a way to get Son personally.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, this was Maddison's first kind of
big day.
Yeah, it's his first big day for quite a while. He's 6.6 million at the moment, so you could be saying, he's turned the corner. But those 16 points, I mean, those aren't points that I'm going to be particularly worried about missing out on, to be honest. Potentially Harvey Barnes as well could be thrown into that sort of bracket.
No.
Yeah. I know you hate the guy. It really is one of those where you're in a bit of a difficult situation at the moment. If you've already got these guys in situ, because you are casting around thinking, who am I going to get in for longevity's sake? I mean, we mentioned, for example, last week, and mentioned it a few times in the past, Maxwell Cornet. Burnley have got good fixtures coming up. He is out of position, but his conversion rate is obviously outrageous. So is he going to be able to keep scoring half of the goals, half the shots that he takes on goal? Possibly not. But Burnley don't play a top 4 team until the last game week of this calendar year, i.e. game week 20. So the next 7 game weeks, all probably games that you'd at least think you might get something in. Another option could be, and maybe we link this into the next question from Dummy Tom, who asks what we're going to do with Mbeumo, the carpenter. Another thing you could do is downgrade entirely and get a 4th defender in, or a 5th defender, or get another defender in. So you've got Mbeumo, you've got Foden. It depends, obviously, or so team specific. But you could find a way, for example, to turn Foden into somebody a little bit cheaper, and finance yourself towards Alonso, or finance yourself towards getting a Diaz or a Walker, because as I just mentioned earlier on, those fixtures for Man City are very, very good. This time last year, they ground out, I think it was 18 wins on the bounce, and it was 11 of those were clean sheets, if I remember correctly. So having double City defence could be a call as well. I do think Gundogan for Foden feels a decent move at the moment. And I think that for Mbeumo, what I'll definitely be doing probably in 2 weeks' time, game week's time, that is, so next weekend, will be taking him down to Gilmore or Basuma or something like that, and upgrading a defender to give myself a 4th defender. Which defender that is, I don't know. But I mean, that's something for Tom to worry about. Anything that, or you can go on?
Yeah, I'm finding it hard to have much to add to that one. To be honest, it's that cheap midfield slot is a kind of a difficult one. I do think, yeah, Tom, that like looking to just beefing up the defense is probably the most sensible thing to do, if at all possible.
Yeah, same thing we covered pretty much last week in detail.
Yep, pretty much the whole part.
Oh, hey, defensive questions, Anthony. Wow, amazing.
Whoa.
I know. What I'm going to do is just kind of the first question is from Wesley, who asks, I have Edison and Sanchez in goal. That's too much money, isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Yes, Wesley. I appreciate the investment and making sure you get points from the goalkeeper position, but that is a lot of money.
Yeah. You don't need that. And the FPL Yogi, with 4 at the back being in vogue, I was talking about, who is the best 5th man? Livra, White, Lamptey, whatever. I mean, Mr. X Lamptey has been subbed for 2 clean sheets. I think he's been subbed off in the 70th, 80th minute. And it's one of those, again, his average position, I think he was 2nd furthest forward last game. Loads of dangerous balls into the box. Just needs a striker who can finish. I mean, Mopé's miss, I've watched that back. My Lord, that is the miss of the season. But he could be one who's interesting. Obviously, maybe this week's a bit of a difficult one away at West Ham. But in general, the 4.4 could be great value if he stays fit. But your man Ben White is quite a solid kind of like love and leave, isn't he? The same way that I've got Connor Cody, I'd stick on my bench and he can come in when he likes or not. Like I've got no worries about him playing 90 minutes. I think he'll play pretty much every game. And I guess if you are messing around with your 5th defender, you want to have that sort of certainty that are going to be coming on, that certainty as well that they're playing for a vaguely defensively solid team. With that in mind, I think probably you just about put White above Cody in terms of relative strength of defenses. What do you think? Boring player like that?
I had to make a decision like this a few weeks back when I made some defensive transfers to get Trent Alexander-Arnold back into my side. And when faced with keeping one of Cody and White, I chose to keep White and sell Cody. Now, in the short run, that hasn't worked out too well because Cody has had 2 particularly decent game weeks with a 6 and an 8, and White only has 1 clean sheet in that period. So not quite as good. But I think over the longer term, the fixtures just favoured White, and that is why I kept him. Livra is an awkward one, and a question that I haven't quite solved myself, because I'm looking at him in my side, and I kind of felt like he was unbenchable for a period when he just seemed to be kind of popping up constantly, and I still kind of live in fear of missing out on Livra points. And I bench him with a really odd amount of fear for a defender that plays for Southampton. It
Yeah.
really is odd. If I was to pick one of them, I think I'd just pick White and I'd upgrade Livramento. I just feel like, White will take away with points. And while Livramento might provide you with the big attacking return that makes you purr, you probably aren't going to get enough clean sheets with it to kind of make it worth it. And it's just like, look, White is just so cheap that it's just so handy to kind of have that 4.4 million entry into the Arsenal defence. I got him at 4.4 as part of a wildcard shenanigan, and he has been pretty much in my team all the way through. So yeah, he'd be my fifth man if I was to pick one.
If you can get to Tomiyasu at 4.6, another decent shout. It creates a couple of chances this week. Got an assist as well. I think I've got 12 points, didn't he? So another one that if you can reach, could be worth doing. But maybe you'd be looking at Tomiyasu and thinking, why aren't I playing you? I think it's all about kind of what you're comfortable with. That's why I'd say someone boring like White, Cody, sort of player you're happy to bench. You're not going to be worried about the points that you've left on the bench potentially with them. Cody got 8 points for me this week, 6 points for me last week. Doesn't bother me because I had never had any intention of playing the guy. But if he comes on, fantastic. Right, last kind of couple of questions. Salah captaincy. So FPL Bow and Gameweeks 10 to 13 has been the Salah perma-cap era. But 14 players have scored more of the same number of points as Salah during this period. How long will the fear of 1 goal in 4 games? How long will Salah be our captain for, basically? And Jamie at Weeds 1990 asked something very similar. With Salah cooling off slightly, can we finally risk other captains, Anthony? I think maybe we should probably tie this into our transfers and captains too. This week, hey, there's the captaincy armband. It's on Mo Salah for your bus team.
Yeah, I think that is as much as anything, just because, if I was to be hit by a bus in the real idea of the bus team, I'd be just quite happy to just leave that armband there ad nauseum. Even when he's at the AFCON, I think he might still find a way to score goals in the FPL. So with that in mind, I'm kind of just kind of struggle to do anything but put it there. I do think we're actually moving towards a position where we can consider moving the armband away from Salah. Like, at the end of the day, it was never banned. It's just that it just came to the point that I think there was such an understanding, I guess, around everyone that Salah's points were going to keep going, and we all just collectively agreed that we were just going to captain him for a while. And that period seems to be now passing. And I think, the fact that this question is coming in and we're entertaining it kind of fills with that. Now, the thing is that, okay, whilst Salah hasn't banged really big numbers in the last few weeks, he has returned in literally every game he's played, like going back donkeys. And that kind of means that, okay, 1 return plus a second return means that you're probably into the big double figure haul territory where he gets bonuses and everything. And unless you've managed to really hit a home run with your other captaincy, you're going to get annihilated. And it's kind of with that in mind and no clear form option being there, you're going to probably have to hilariously captain a defender if you want to go with anybody to go against the Salah grain, because I kind of feel like there's nobody else kind of really consistently doing it in an attacking sense. Okay, you could point to Jota if you wanted to, but you're relying on the same team to do well in an attacking sense then, and that brings with it its own risk that Salah just ends up taking the penalty that wins Liverpool a game as they grind out Christmas results. So you'd probably be looking at some defender for that captaincy, and I'm not sure if I'm personally there yet. Now, the glaring absence from my own side is a second Chelsea defender, and I think I'd love to try and address that. I've been wondering to myself if, of all times, this is where I might actually consider a hit and do one of my mini wildcards and sell Saka, who is currently injured and currently on my bench. I then would be also probably selling Rafinha, who is currently starting on my team and who I've just kind of got a bit fed up with. And then I would look to get Jota in. I would look to have Rafinha down to some, low enough, just cheap enough midfielder. And it would be probably Livramento, who would then go up to probably Reece James. Although maybe I'd consider a double Man City defense. I kind of need to really kind of think that through. I feel like the double Chelsea defense is the one I would go for, even if the fixtures aren't necessarily as good there. Those wing backs have just been getting so many points that I think it's hard to ignore. So that's where my head is at currently. I know I said about selling Rafinha, in that the other player who is potentially on the chopping block and who would provide a little bit more funds and who there's an obvious replacement for is actually Mikel Antonio, and that would be Josh King then. Which is be kind of hilarious, but it's just basically there's a lot of money locked up in him, and I could kind of do something interesting. So I think more likely than not, I will end up doing 3 transfers this week, is what I would say. But I think the captaincy will stay with Salah because I'm a wimp.
Yeah, I think he's still got that massive EO, hasn't he? It's very hard to look around it. And as you said, he keeps returning. Even if they're not explosions, he keeps returning. And if you watch Liverpool games, look at the underlying numbers, that explosion could come in any game. And as you say, you need to have that home run, even if it is, you're talking about kind of your Reece James captaincy getting you a 32-point blinder and Salah getting an assist. That could happen. It could happen. The likelihood is, though, that it probably won't. And as you say, the EO vacuum that is Salah will suck up all of your rank and leave you tumbling. Maybe game week 15, Spurs versus Norwich, if they look a bit better against Brentford.
Yep. No, you just don't. You just don't know what Spurs can do.
Exactly.
You
game
really
week
just
16, United versus Norwich again. These are both games that you could be looking at it, because at the end of the day, Salah's got Wolves when Spurs have got Norwich in game week 15, and Salah's got Villa at home. The return of Gerrard when United have got Norwich. But at the moment, it's obviously very good to have the captaincy split, because that means you've got that sort of leeway to make your way up the ranks. The problem is with that is that it comes with a bit of a risk, and it's nice at the moment in some ways. I do like it at the moment because you can cheer on pretty much all of your players apart from Trent, pretty much, who's just, his points might as well not exist. So I think that as it stands, we leave it on Salah, but we can start to kind of consider thinking not doing it. But I think there's going to be Salah's kind of residual captaincy all the way up to AFCON. It's probably going to be over 100% every week. So every time you do kind of think about coming off Salah, it's going to be a really well thought out and considered decision to do so, in my view. Perhaps not something to do kind of at 10:59 on a Saturday. My own team, I also have the captain on Salah, obviously, and I am doing the opposite to you, and I'm rolling, I think. And there's lots I want to do, and oddly, this week, my plans all hinge on Andreas Christensen, of all people. Yes, I've still got him. And if he played today versus United, I probably would have I'd probably be thinking about taking -4, but he didn't. So I'm going to assume he plays versus Watford. So I've got that Chelsea double defence. I think I'm just going to leave it. I've got Cody first bench against Burnley as well. So if he doesn't play, then I've got like a decent sub coming on. But my team is achingly template. I mean, it comes to something really when my differentials for next weekend, so for midweek, are Christensen and Guaita. Those are probably going to be my only 2 differentials, because I've got Guaita in goal, James, Cancelo, and Trent plus Christensen. In midfield, I've got Rafinha, Jota, Salah, and Gallagher, and up front I've got Antonio and Kane. So, I mean, Kane, I think probably still just about counts as differential, but it is, it's achingly template at the moment. So I think it needs 2 free transfers. I think I need to do something with it to kind of make it into a team which can be a bit more sort of offensive in terms of the rank. But I don't think midweek with a hit is going to be the place to do it. So I'm going to leave it this midweek with a decently serviceable team and go into it.
This isn't like very clearly itchy fingers time for you, like, Tom. Like, just to give people a perspective, like after game week 9 you're at 794k. Now after game week 13 you're at about 194k. That's a pretty significant drop, or a significant improvement, whilst moving towards the template. The benefit maybe of actually being on the template is that not everyone is on the template.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think that there are a couple of players who are probably missing. I mean, there's no Arsenal defender. We spoke about that earlier. I didn't have either with the goal, Guaita in goal, bit of an abomination. I mean, one thing that is kind of coming to my mind a little bit more is potentially going 4 at the back, but 4 at the back in a different way, i.e., putting Ederson in goal, and for the great Man City fixtures. Like, I'm liking that more and more. Plus, I know a couple of people who have Ederson in goal. I've seen my record with goalkeepers this year, and they're begging me not to put Ederson in goal. This makes me think I want to put Ederson in goal. But that could be something that I do. I mean, Embuemo's on the chopping block, Christensen's on the chopping block, and Greater. I don't really like the guy, so I think that that kind of mini wildcard can be done over the weekend. Stick heads in the goal for the foreseeable future, and laugh as the clean sheet points roll in for City over the next kind of 10 game weeks or so. Whew, right, there you go. Quick turnaround podcast. I think that is everything, isn't it, Anthony?
Yeah, and that is indeed. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. This was Who Got the Assist. If you would like to join our mini league, then 2IP43T is the code that you need to remember and type in. As Tom said, we'll probably have to think about locking that up at some point. We haven't really put a date on it, but we probably will, because we don't want ruffians like James Croft coming in and taking over spots in the top 10. That would be a shambolic state of affairs if we were to allow that to continue. Also, if you would like to watch us rather than listen to us, then if you just search WGTA on YouTube, or Who Got the Assist on YouTube for that matter, you will find recordings of the podcast in a slightly longer form than the edited form that the podcasts tend to go up on in your audio feeds.
And correspondence, how do people reach us?
Oh, the correspondence, actually, how dare I forget? Yes, if you would like to have your email, or indeed any other sort of art that could be shared in podcast form, then you can send that to whogottheassist@gmail.com. It would be greatly appreciated.
Excellent. Well, I'll be back home on Thursday with better audio. I'll have my microphone then. We'll do a quick turnaround pod of some description. It'll be quite late on and only be live for 1 day. So I doubt we'll be I think this is quite a fairly long one with a quick turnaround. So maybe a very short one. We'll see. Anyway, we hope to assist you ahead of Gameweek14. Apologies again for the sound on this podcast. So I'm not at home, so it is what it is. But back very, very soon. Have a great midweek game week. And speak to you next week. Well, this week, in fact. Bye.
Hey.